All right. Everyone gets to come in the middle of this conversation. How fun is that? But no, the Florida bill was good. You called it. We talked about that and the strings attached. I love that headline, though. It was exactly like what you were talking about. Oh, it was a good time. All right, let me see here. We're going live everywhere. Okay. There we go. I hear my sound. Okay. Yep. I hear your sound. All right. Well, we are rolling along here. For everyone who's joining, let me go ahead and say welcome to another Thursday installment of Unauthorized Caucus. You've got Ryan and Andrew here, and hopefully we look the same on your screens, but our screens look a little bit different. As promised from last week when we had our technology burned down and it all just decided to stop working on us, we have switched over. I've got a different piece of software rolling. We're going to try this, and we'll probably move forward in this manner. I'm seeing, it looks like we're going live everywhere. Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. I am looking into Rumble. I'm going to try to figure out how to make that work. The big tech overlords that make streaming in multiple places at once easy for us don't like Rumble. So Rumble is not quite on their list yet, but I'm trying to figure out a way to finagle that in without sacrificing quality across the board. So welcome. I see lots of folks coming in here. So welcome. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for being with us. Glad to be back, Andrew, with you in person on the screen instead of texting me as this third party. That was odd, but a necessary, I guess, item out of our crazy everything. So it's been 2 weeks. How are you?
Doing really well. Yeah, sorry about last week. I might as well have sent you a smoke signal, but it might have got confused with all the debris coming from Ohio. So
I was about to say, if you would have sent up the smoke signal, I might not have known the difference. I've seen that big black cloud is coming really far. But yeah. Well, I tell you what, folks, we've had a lot of, Andrew and I have been texting back and forth. It's been 2 weeks full of memes, news stories, a bunch of other stuff, and some of it worth sharing. Well, all of it worth sharing, but some of it more important than others is what I should say. But there's been some really big things that have gone down in the last 2 weeks, and there was one in particular, one topic, I should say, that we wanted to kind of get into. First of all, just on one of the past topics that we were talking about, we were just regaling here a couple weeks ago when we were in person together. You all probably remember we talked about the Florida education bill. That was a kind of a side. Here it is. Yeah, that was kind of a side note. We were talking about the Alex Newman presentation. He was here in town. I had some thoughts. Andrew had some thoughts. We were pointing people to good resources. But one of the things, people are talking about this new Florida education bill. How do we offer some funds to all these homeschool families who are doing this and are outside of the public school system? And that was Andrew's warning. What was it? What was the shekels and the shackles? You got to watch it. You reach for the shekels, and here come the shackles, because there's always strings attached to those carrots. There's something bad that's going on. And sure enough, the New American, the article by Alex Newman, just 1 day ago, Florida bill offers government cash to families who surrender educational liberty. So what we were saying, I mean, he just, he went the full 9 yards, but that's what's in there. True to form, I know that there's a lot of stuff that kind of comes around and looks good, but that's why we need to have conversations like, we get to have with you every week, and like Andrew and I get to have with each other. Hey, wait a minute, but this kind of looks good on its face. What happens when we actually read this bill, get down into the line item of it, and see what happens? No, this isn't as good as it looked to begin with. It's kind of like the beautiful cake, but you get down and realize someone forgot to put the sugar in it. This isn't worth anything anymore. It might look nice from the outside, but it's awful and ruined. And that's really, that's what this Florida bill is starting to look like it is. There's all the strings attached. So these conversations are important. These things that we're talking about are important to know, and we're glad to be here with you to do it. So let me kick off this topic. I have, first of all, wow, I've got just little Andrews everywhere on my screen. Let me move. I've got there's several monitors here, and I'm trying. Which one is the real Andrew? Is what I'm trying to ascertain here, and I think I might have gotten it nailed down. But yeah, let's hop into something. So if you are following, if you're following us on the email list or on social media or going onto the website, which you should be doing, go and like and share and subscribe, by the way, everything that we're doing right now. If you're on YouTube, smash that subscribe button, hit the little notification bell, retweet us on Twitter, wherever you are, and then send a link to someone right now. Tell them that we're about to have a really good discussion and they should get into the middle of it. But if you were on the email list, which you should be at phyllisschlafly.com, you can sign up. Last week you would have seen we were talking about a brand new report that came out that I've got open right here in front of me from a young woman named Jamie Reed, a St. Louis, Missouri, right here in the middle of our hometown area, a St. Louis native who works in the Washington University medical system, specifically at St. Louis Children's Hospital. She has worked at the Transgender Center at St. Louis Children's Hospital now for, was it 4 years, Andrew? And then she was somewhere else for a few years inside the system before that.
Almost 3 years, it says.
Okay, almost 3. But she has decided to blow the whistle. And this is, I mean, the opening line she says in this expose she wrote, I'll go ahead and post it here in the Free Press. Her opening line: I am a 42-year-old St. Louis native, a queer woman, and politically to the left of Bernie Sanders. I mean, this isn't someone who shares the same worldview as Andrew and I, but this is someone who has been inside the system and said, wait a minute, when it comes to gender transitioning and gender affirming care is the buzzword that the left likes to use. When it comes to that being inside the medical system, this is not what they're saying publicly. What's actually happening is a far different story. And she kind of broke the whole thing wide open in a very big, long article posted last week, February the 9th. And she is getting a lot of heat. I mean, the hate that has poured out toward her online has been pretty phenomenally awful from folks who would have counted her as one of their ideological buddies, people who got along with her on all of these different fronts. And she pulled the curtain back on the fact that there is no research to back up the fact that if some of these young people experiencing gender dysphoria, which this is the medical term for it, if some of these people experiencing gender dysphoria don't receive gender affirming care, they go on to have great self-harm or fall into depression or this or that or the other. She says, I thought there was research, and there is none. And it turns out that we're not moving slowly and all of these different things. It's just absolutely kind of mind-boggling. So we had a big release on it. I wrote about it. I'm going to go and post these articles. Andrew, I want to get your hot take. What are some of the things that she brought up that everyone needs to know? And then what are kind of some of your quick takes on it? And then let's kind of go through some of this, because there's a few other articles I want to share and go down the list, because this is something people need to know about. The lies that are being fed are just simply that. They're lies. And we're starting to get people inside saying, here is the proof. You're not wrong to call this all a load of crockery. So, Andrew, what's she saying?
Yeah.
What do you think?
Well, so I read the whole thing, and what was so interesting about her report is, it's like you said, Ryan, this is somebody who ideologically wouldn't agree with you and I, but she's stepping back and she's saying, I'm blowing the whistle. This is insane. I might have my political opinions, but these are kids. And you and I talked about this before the stream, Ryan, that, even something like this is so refreshing because it's kind of that return to sanity that, hey, we might have political disagreements, but at the end of the day, these are kids and they should be able to make these decisions. And reading the article, it really kind of confirmed, as somebody who's been inside this system at, Wash U for almost 4 years, she said that so many of these girls, and I'll read a quote from it, she said the girls who came to us many times, she also makes the statement that they many times would come in batches from the same high school. Some of these girls who would come in to get gender affirming care. She said the girls who came to us had many comorbidities, depression, anxiety, ADHD, eating disorders, obesity. Many were diagnosed with autism or had autism-like systems. She said a report last year on the British Pediatric Transgender Center found that 1/3 of the patients that they treated were on the autism spectrum. But she said so many of these patients have had disorders that no one believed they had, Tourette's syndrome, tic disorders, but she said all the time they were self-diagnosed things that they really didn't have. And she's kind of making the case that so many of these clumps of kids that are coming out of school, or maybe they're being pressured or influenced online, more of this isn't something that maybe they felt from birth, but it's kind of a social contagion. And she says that over and over again, that this is like a social contagion epidemic. That these girls and these kids are seeing something on TikTok or they're seeing something on Instagram and they start thinking, well, hey, maybe I'm gay, maybe I'm a woman. And it's like this social contagion. And the second you step into that community, they affirm you. And she says that, you have to go and look at a psychiatrist and they'll treat you. But most of the time, all those are just green lights, a check on the box. The psychiatrist doesn't actually evaluate the person, try to understand them. They just say, oh, do you feel like a woman? And they're like, yeah, I do. And it's like, great. Well, you can go and have this surgery and take all these different puberty blockers and gender morphers. But she goes through the side effects, and I encourage everyone to read the article because it's incredible. But one of the things that really struck me was she gave a lot of instances of actual cases and actual experiences she had with people. Yeah. She talked about this one girl who was on, testosterone, and her body was starting to have very negative effects because of the testosterone. She said the girl called her and was just very upset, very distraught. And she said at the end of the call, quote, "Wow, we really hurt this kid." That she's starting to have this red pill moment of what we're doing here is not good. But this one paragraph really kind of stuck out to me. She said, "There are rare conditions in which babies are born with atypical genitalia, cases that are sophisticated and require care and compassion. But clinics like the one where I worked are creating a whole cohort of kids with atypical genitals, and most of these teens haven't even come to the understanding of any sort of, mature thoughts or sexuality. They're kids. They had no idea what they were going to do or what they were going to be as an adult. Yet all it took for them to permanently transform themselves was one or two short conversations with the therapist who immediately affirmed them, immediately, subscribed to whatever woke bullet points that they happened to give these students, green light them, and hey, you can go have this gender affirming care." But the statistics are incredible. In the last 15 years, the U.S. went from having not even one pediatric gender affirming care clinic to now having over 100. So in 15 years, we went from 0 to 100 pediatric kids gender affirming care clinics, and they're doing this for kids, and all they have to do is come in and say, "Hey, I feel like a girl," or "I feel like a boy." A couple meetings with the therapist, green light it. Yep, they said that. That's what they believe. Go ahead and do the surgery. And it's ridiculous, Ryan. But this is so interesting because, she's risking her career and she's risking her livelihood and her safety because she just sees that this is morally and ethically wrong. That's what she begins to say at the beginning of the article. And it's medically appalling. And she's exactly right. And this isn't like our super right-wing issue. At least it shouldn't be. This should just be common sense that, hey, kids shouldn't have this done to them. And, the institutions and the powers that be shouldn't be green-lighting this and allowing it. So it's a great piece. Everyone should go and read it. But a great wake-up call, especially for those in St. Louis who are here, to be able to look at this and see it in our backyard because it's happening.
Yeah. And I mean, this leads into her, what she is, and you said so, like this is, I have a hard time putting words to some of this because so many of these things are pieces that we've been able to talk about or that we've heard revealed. But this one person who does not share our ideology, which to me gives this so much, even more credibility, someone who's going against the social narrative that they thought they supported, that's a big deal. When someone's willing to change their mind or be honest in spite of this world that is so polarizingly stuck to these two different, no, we must be opposite. If you don't believe this is true, then I believe it's true. And if I think this is true, then you must think, like, we kind of have arrived at that world. So to find someone who will independently step outside of it automatically adds some really interesting credibility to the situation. I'm very grateful for her voice in that sense because it's more credible than you or me saying these things. It's someone who said, I believed in this and I went inside the system and I actually saw what happened. I can tell you now what it is that's happening, not what I think about it, what's happening. And I mean, everyone should read this. As difficult as some of this will be to get through, she does a pretty good job staying what I would call clinical with it. She does a very good job talking about it because she was, let me specify, she was a caseworker. So she was actually one of the ones who was in the pipeline process of bringing people into the clinic. And she actually saw and described how there was this massive, drastic shift. And you started to talk about it, the social contagion, where from one side we started, there used to be a few calls every few months, and it was typically young boys with certain circumstances. It kind of mirrored, it was a lot of the same. And then all of a sudden, it just shifted to this huge push of young women, adolescent women, coming in looking for a sex change. And it was so undeniably odd to her, this shift that happened, that she started really paying attention, and then she started realizing we're shoving people through. In fact, she had some wild stories about people who came to them through the pipeline of the mental health, emergency unit, people who had self-harm issues and schizophrenia, and they pulled them in and it was, self-harm issues, you want to have self-harm with your male genitalia? Well, we'll probably go ahead and put you on some puberty blockers because you must think you're a girl. And it's like, no, this schizophrenic had wild self-harm issues that had nothing to do with gender dysphoria even, but we're just pipelining him straight through. So we can, not that there's probably money at the other side of this, but as we've learned anything about hospitals recently, the bottom line is the bottom line, and if there's money to be had, we'll shift people through and count things as COVID deaths or count things as gender dysphoria. So she really does an excellent job moving through some of this. But this tacks on with something else that I'd really like to post down here. The fact that one of the things she's concerned about is that, and she even has some screenshots of her emails, her and other people suggesting time. If you're having these feelings, you feel like you're stuck in the wrong body, you'd like to do something about it, you come in and you're asking about taking testosterone. Let's take some time. Let's work with the therapists, with the psychiatrists. Let's make sure, because these are big things. But instead, others were just streamlining everyone right through. And she started to have an issue with that. And sure enough, this actually mirrors, and I'm trying to find, I have a good link. This actually mirrors a report that came out. The Epoch Times reported, hold on. Fox News is talking in my ear. Sorry about that. This actually mirrors one of the things, I had a window popped open. The Epoch Times actually posted a story, and we talked about it. Let me drop it down here. I actually asked the question, if the left is going to follow the science on gender, because Europe is really in the middle of, and a lot of Americans don't know this, Europe is in the middle of a major backtracking right now on what has happened. They are absolutely finding out that tons of young people get into these feelings of gender dysphoria, and it is just a natural thing. Young people don't feel comfortable in their skin, and as they grow and mature with proper care, not with radical, just let's shove you into a surgical or permanent hormone chemical castration situation, 80% of young people end up working this gender dysphoria problem out by the time that they reach adolescence or go through adolescence. 80% of those with actual gender dysphoria, not the social contagion, and end up working it out. You're seeing the UK, you're seeing places in the EU start to really pump the brakes on a lot of their treatment of minors when it comes to this stuff, while the U.S. is mashing the gas. And like Jamie Reed is talking about, we're not even just, mashing the gas on people who come to us. We're shoving people through that haven't even asked. Like, how fast can we just create something here? So it's really kind of interesting when you see some of these research things come together, you realize there's definitely an agenda behind it. Just logically looking at the situation, we're not talking about we're addressing this because it's coming to us. No, you guys are manufacturing an issue that didn't exist. And then we can, you talk about social contagion. That's a whole separate set of conversations we could get into about TikTok. What was it? Social contagion? Someone said something about TikTok diagnosis. You said that, and I see our comment stream is going down here. It looks a little different than it used to. I apologize if I don't get to all of your comments as I see them rolling in. But I mean, really, I don't feel like I fit in. Well, let's go to TikTok and see what they tell me to do. Oh, this is interesting. People know where to go and advertise.
Another interesting thing, Ryan, is I think that a lot of people my age, and I've seen this, they want a community and they want a sense of community. And sometimes self-diagnosing yourself as transgender or queer or bisexual or ADHD or bipolar or multiple personalities, whatever, you pick one out of the grab bag. There are genuine people that have those issues and it's a real struggle and stuff. But there's also another really large group of people that just self-diagnose themselves with these different illnesses, and especially in the gender realm of gender dysphoria. And then they find community in that, especially on TikTok and online. But to reference kind of that study you were talking about, that came out of Finland, and it said that 80% of kids grow out of gender dysphoria. And this is a study that came out of university in Finland. And you can't just allow kids to do something to their body that's going to last forever, maybe make them sterile. When, like you said, Ryan, so many people have self-image issues, body conscience issues, especially when they're young and they're a teenager. I can imagine teenage girls in high school, having body issues and thinking, well, maybe I'm this, maybe I'm that. And Jamie Reed says, all they have to do is go to a therapist, get a green light, and now they can, legally change something to their bodies. And, kind of shifting to this a little bit, we're starting to see some states, particularly Oklahoma and South Dakota, these are two that have been in the news, that are now taking a legislative action against this. banning transition surgeries for students. You saw Oklahoma Governor Kevin Stitt called on lawmakers at a State of the Union address, and he said that we must protect our most vulnerable children. He said minors can't vote, they can't purchase alcohol, they can't purchase cigarettes. We shouldn't allow a minor to get permanent gender-altering surgery in Oklahoma. That's why I'm calling on the legislature to send me a bill that bans all gender transition surgeries and hormone therapies on minors in the state. This is exactly on par. This is what should be happening because we can't condone this. We can't let this happen. And I understand, people are going to say, well, let people do what they want. Let people have, free reign. But these are minors. These are kids that maybe don't have a stable and loving set of parents. And somebody has to step in and protect them. Because, just like these clinics in St. Louis, they're not only allowing, but they're almost promoting this type of surgery. And there needs to be a protection against that. And this is exactly on the right course to be able to do that.
And I think that this is, an incredibly important thing to talk about as conservatives start to have this conversation. As we as conservatives, you and me, let me lean into the camera, whatever it is we're supposed to do. The folks that we're talking to here. As we have these conversations with people, I think one of the very important things to distinguish is that there are two different conversations happening here. And if I have my let me smack my microphone a little bit more. I have my beliefs and I have my convictions on gender and sexuality, and a lot of that is informed by my Christian faith. Andrew, I know the same for you. A lot of other people, whether it's exactly a Christian faith, same Christian faith as mine. This is one conversation to have. The idea of, gender roles, sexuality, biology, there's a layer to talk about there. And there's also a layer to talk about what is or is not scientifically possible when it comes to adulthood. But this is a conversation about decision-making and personal responsibility. And if we, to your point, Kevin Stitt just said it the greatest, Governor Stitt down in Oklahoma, there are restrictions on kids. We don't trust you to drive until you're 16. We don't trust you to vote till you're 18. We don't trust you to join the military till you're 17. We don't trust you to smoke or drink until you're smoke at 18, drink at 21. If we put all of these restrictions on it because there's some health implication for young brains and drinking, or there's some decision-making implication for young brains and driving, why in the world are we even arguing? Now, again, according to Jamie Reed, it's not even so genuine. We're just shoving people through the pipeline, not listening to these kids. Oh, that makes sense. You want to be a little girl? Okay. It's not even that. We're just shoving people through. Why in the world would we try to pretend like this is something that kids can know instantly? I mean, if you want to say, fine, you got a 5-year waiting period, that even makes more sense than what we're doing. But it's so nonsensical that this conversation should be a no-brainer. For us to be able to communicate with people about this should be universal. Minors cannot be involved in gender-affirming care or gender transitioning surgeries or procedures or chemicals or hormones. Why is this not universal? I mean, this is a very obviously permanent, life-altering decision that can never be taken back. We just don't let minors do that at all. And this is one of those I don't understand. I mean, maybe there are people who truly, and this is it. I mean, I wonder, let me ask you, if you've run into anyone, do you think they're motivated by this purity of mind that Jamie was saying she was, involved in? I wanted to help people. There were all these young people I assumed had these issues, and we need to help them work their way through it. If they don't receive care, then they're probably going to turn to self-harm. Do people really believe that? Are they not paying attention? Are they just so uninformed? Because when you look at it, this conversation we're having isn't even about what adults can or can't decide to do, whether or not I agree with it from a scientific or conviction-based point of view. This is about kids. And this conversation, people do all sorts of stupid things, policy-wise, on the basis of doing it for the kids. I mean, think about all the things, even conservative states like Missouri. We allowed gambling legally for the kids because it's education money. That excuse always flies. So here, hey, this isn't good for them. We're going to stop all gender-affirming or transgender care for minors because it's for the kids. They need to know what they're doing and have a full picture before we walk into this. Why does that not just fly? What is motivating people to be so blind to what's going on here and just let it go? Whether they agree with it or not, they're still letting it go. I'm just curious. What do you think? Is this out of ignorance? Is it out of misguided intent, like Jamie Reed expressed, came from her values? What do you think? because we got to figure out how to communicate this to people, how to get them to look at this and say, oh my gosh, we got to have, like, this is the time for government to step in and say, no, you can't do that. And if you try, we'll put you in jail. You can't hurt the kids like this. End of discussion.
I think the root cause of it, like the root foundational cause of this whole issue, is a spiritual war, right?
Sure.
God, it made us as individuals. He assigned us a gender. He knew us way before we were in our mother's womb. And what would Satan want us to do? Well, he would want us to, one, think like we were gods, knowing good and evil, acting as God, deciding who we are apart from a creator, and not accepting the God-given gender and role in which our creator gave us. So it fits perfectly from a spiritual perspective into Satan's playbook to get people to doubt what God created them to be, and then subsequently subvert their purpose on this earth ultimately. So I think that's a problem. And then the other part of it is just the woke narrative, right? To be able to push this, because how many times have you heard this? I've heard this on PBS and other broadcasts, when parents are talking about their son who was transgender and they transitioned. Well, it's better to have a living daughter than a dead son. You ever heard somebody say that, that if you don't allow your kid to do this, they're going to commit suicide? But the reality of it is, and I don't have the study pulled up, but they're all over if you want to look them up, is that people who do these gender transition surgeries do not find themselves fulfilled, and they do not find the peace that they were thinking pre-surgery that they would discover. Actually, the opposite's true. And Jamie Reed talks about this girl who, had a certain piece of her biology removed and ended up calling the ER saying, I'm going back to my birth name. I don't want to be a man anymore. I want that part of me back. And, they ended up, the surgeon ended up, recommending this girl to their clinic because she was so distraught by her decision. I think that's far more common than people who want to transition and are going to commit suicide or be depressed because they're in their natural God-given state. I think the opposite's true. I think once you deviate out of that, you'll end up being more depressed and more likely to commit suicide or whatever that may be. So I think ultimately it's a spiritual battle, and I think that there's a spiritual war raging in this, as there is everything when it comes to good and evil, but also subsequently from a political perspective, I think it fits perfectly into the woke playbill if we can reassign gender and change this and then greenlight this and get enough people, especially kids, to be able to question this. Essentially, if you can get people to mutilate their own bodies, you can get them to do anything. And I think that's exactly what we see going on.
And I mean, honestly, if you think about it, I'm just going to add one more because, man, there's so many layers we could go down to. But I kind of want to spend just our last couple of minutes here. And there's been a few things going on down here. And someone actually just asked a completely unrelated question that I think we might want to get into in a future broadcast. That actually sounds like a fun topic. You and I might have a good discussion on. But one of the things, this is a good point. Someone says in a lot of ways this is anti-American because our system is built to slow everything down so that crazy can't act so quickly. That's actually very true. There's always checks and balances. There are holdups and slowdowns, and that's all for a reason. If you're going to do something big, make sure. Just double check. Make sure and take your time. If you're rushing, you're probably doing it wrong. Not that there's not a time to be rapid. I lost my train of thought. This really kind of fits in because if you look down at our political and cultural battle that's taking place, this is one thing, and I know that you and I both have had very similar worldview training, so our terminology is going to be the same. But the principles of liberty, this Judeo-Christian ethic, whether or not you subscribe to a specific version of Christianity, go to church every week, this Judeo-Christian ethic, this ethos that surrounds it, is what America was founded upon. And that liberty is very dependent upon there being absolute truth, a natural law and order that exists outside of our own control. So, what do we find when we go looking at the opposite of that liberty, at the opposite of that Judeo-Christian ethic? You find socialism, which is stemming from Marxism, which comes from a place of secular humanism, not Judeo-Christian values. So, what is the primary thing there? Over and over and over and over again, whether it's communism, cultural Marxism, we see that man is a product of his surroundings. We're removing personal responsibility from this. So this is yet really one more way that, cultural Marxists or socialists, whatever you want to call it, this is one more way the secular humanist can convince you, if we can just change the surrounding of your body, everything will be better, get you to go after this. And what you're doing is denying the natural order. You're denying the things that actually make sense, that make you free, because you then throw off, or think you've thrown off, the bounds of these, outside absolute truths, and you get to make your own destiny. And that's just not how it works. And to your point, it ends in distraction. If we can convince you to do this, what else could we convince you to do? Pretty much anything at this point. Because you so much believe that the responsibility is not yours personally to abide inside these rules, but to just, I can make up whatever I want. And it's always someone else's fault. It's my circumstance or my parents or the body that I was born into, which was wrong. Like, everything is wrong. I'm always right and everything else is wrong. This just, man, you put up blinders and you don't look at what's around you anymore, and it's really easy to be ruled and lorded over by people who are doing this to you. So there's another interesting marker there that calls us back to an exactly anti-American. And someone said that anti-American. That's another anti-American part of this, is that this is coming directly from the thing that wants to tear down our American system politically, culturally, and then where that came from spiritually. Because to your point, at the end of everything, I mean, as Christians, that's what we both believe, and I think it's true. This is a spiritual battle. All of these things are spiritual battles. So there's a very compelling case for that, whether or not you'd like to subscribe to it. But let's move on here. First of all, I'll tell you this offline. Someone put down in the comments what I think we might want to talk about at least next week or maybe the week after. But real quick, you started to touch on it. What can people do about this? What can we do right now other than share this information? I would argue you just heard from Oklahoma Governor Stitt. That is not the only thing. Here in Missouri, when this story took off, in case you didn't know, our Attorney General, Andrew Bailey, immediately shot into action, demanding and starting up an investigation. He actually suggested a moratorium on all gender transition procedures and all gender transition hormone therapies. I don't remember if it was in total or on minors, until we have time to investigate the full extent of what is obviously corruption and not abiding by what they even said they were doing at this clinic. So there are people who are calling for that. And then also South Dakota actually passed, and just on this past Monday, signed a ban on drugs and surgeries for minors when it relates to gender transition surgery. Governor Kristi Noem up in South Dakota, she did a great job. And sure enough, it was at the Help Not Harm bill. So that ends the use of puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, cross-sex surgeries for any minors in South Dakota. Boom, banned, gone. And if you try, you're going to jail. This is going to become a huge offense. Obviously, not for the people seeking this, but for the people giving out this care. Much like the left always likes to say about abortions, no one's trying to criminalize moms who are in crisis. We're trying to criminalize people who are preying upon them, the providers, not the seekers. So this is time for state action. This is time for state, and as limited government as you and I are, this is the time government step in and do something to stop a predatory industry that is absolutely off kilter of reality. So contact your state representatives. Contact your state officials. Ask them what they're doing about this to protect the kids in your state. Because I don't think we want anything legislated from a national level about this. As much sense as that would make, my federalist principles say we should not set a precedent for, federal government laying down the law on issues like this. This should stay state issues. That's really the power where we want it, even though some states we're going to have what seems like an impossible battle to get them to do anything about this. Andrew, what do you think? What should people do outside of that, if anything?
Yeah, and just on the comment of that bill, it's called the Help Not Harm Bill, House Bill 1080 in the South Dakota legislature. So if you wanted to look that up, there's the information on that. But yeah, Ryan, I think you're exactly right. We're limited government. This is not something for the federal government to get involved in. But it is something I think that the state governments can get involved in and say, you know what, we are not going to allow this in our state. At the very least, put a pause on it and say, at least let's have some research that supports this to be able to have a better grip and a better understanding of what it does. But at the end of the day, there's also some parental rights issues when it comes to this, where parents are being subverted, and there's story after story after story of there being two parents, one parent supporting gender-affirming care, whether that be puberty blockers, estrogen, testosterone, whatever it may be, and another parent saying, whoa, no, I don't want this to happen. And, it gets fleshed out and it gets litigated. So I think there's definitely a legal standpoint from a state perspective to be able to get involved in this, to say, you know what, at least let's cap it at an age, to say, at the very least, you have to be this age to be able to do it. And maybe that's 18. I would, of course, if I had my druthers, I'd want it to not happen at all. But if you're going to do that, at least make it at 18, because like you said, Ryan, earlier, quoting the governor from Oklahoma, you can't buy alcohol you can't smoke, you can't go off to war. Why should we be able to do this, especially if your parents are against it and there's a parental rights issue? So I think this is a good place for the state to come in for the time being to be able to put the kibosh on it, at least until we have more data.
And let me be abundantly clear. This ties back to the conversation we had a couple weeks ago. Children, parental rights. Your children do not belong to the state. Our children are not a product of the community. They are a responsibility given to us as parents to take care of, to make the best decisions for, to see in adulthood to where they make decisions for themselves. And in case you don't think there's already not a connection here, you referenced the between schools. The Post Millennial talked about this when they wrote about this whistleblower article that Jamie Reed has now put out. They also talked about how they had reported in the past experts at this same center, the St. Louis Children's Hospital Transgender Center, had advised a Missouri school district to withhold information about students using, what was it specifically? Oh, it was chest compression devices, which is a non-surgical route to trying to change your anatomy. This exact center that Jamie is blowing the whistle on had advised a Missouri school district to not tell parents about students using these. In fact, they set up, I think, this whole scheme about. And this is Parkway School District. This is in West County. This isn't some deep, deep, deep blue. I mean, maybe it's a little purpley, but this is out in West County, St. Louis, which has historically been a pretty conservative area. But someone was, they were offering guidance and saying even that, we could keep lockers at school where your kids can keep these things and not have to take them home. We don't have to tell the parents. I mean, the schools are quite literally teaching their employees how to help students hide this from their parents, how to not guide any of these questions toward parents, how to keep them uninvolved from the situation. That alone should raise your neck hair in a way that makes you angry and frustrated as a parent or not. That is not good. I mean, that raises some issues. So don't think that this isn't already happening. Don't think that there isn't actually a conspiracy already inside of schools to move this direction. There is. Make no mistake, it's there. And it very much does not respect any role of parents in the decision-making around their kids or the raising of their kids. So let me drop that one in here too before we completely close it out so you guys can grab that article. But this just goes off into lots of things, and it's time. It is time for states to start moving quickly to address this. And again, we're not even talking about adult decisions here and transgender or not. We're talking about children making their own decisions or being guided correctly through the difficulty of growing up and growing into themselves and figuring out who they are and how they fit into the world. This should be a no-brainer to protect that and keep a slow hold on. Let's just wait. Let's see. Let's work through this. Let's find counseling. This should just be a no-brainer. So there is a lot to this, but I think this is something that all of us should. I mean, we've layered you all up with a lot of articles here today. Go and look, because there's information that we need to know, and there are solutions that we need to know about and be pursuing as well. So this is a conversation to be had, because this gets pretty touchy pretty quickly, and it gets flared off. But there's a lot here that we need to be discussing with people. So I would encourage you, dive in, take a look at some of the resources we've put down, know what's happening, and have some of these discussions, because I think there are a lot of people who need to come to the realization of what's actually happening, and that they need to be a part of doing something about it, because it's really bad out there. It's not conspiratorial to talk about shoving kids through the pipeline and just putting them on drugs and just chopping off body parts and doing this and do it. It's happening. It is literally happening, and people from inside the system are telling us so. So we got to wake up and look alive at what all's happening, because it's a big deal, and this involves the next generation. I mean, you're wiping out the mental health and quite possibly the reproductive capabilities of future generations of our country. That's not how species survive. That doesn't work well, and that's what we're letting people do, to humanity here in America. And if Europe's pulling back from it, it's probably time that America ought to take a hard look at that too, and see what we should do. So, yeah, that's all I've got on that, Andrew. Unless you have any other closing thoughts, this is a little bit of a heavier one, but I thought that this is a lot of stuff that broke Thursday and Friday. We didn't really get into it last week. Frankly, we didn't get into anything last week because you were texting me and I was monologuing here from my desk. So, we didn't quite get a chance to get into this one, but I wanted to bring it to you all as part of this discussion because it's a big one. And it's just, as you've heard from ours, it just spider webs off into so many different things that are all connected. We got to be paying attention and vigilant on all of these fronts and working and paying attention and voting the right way, making the right calls, having the right conversations with other people, asking the right questions at public meetings, and it's all connected. We can't just sit back on our, rest on our laurels watching Netflix. That's not how life works for us anymore. We have to do something about it, and we have to be knowledgeable first, and then be bold. So that's all I've got for this week.
Yep. And I'd leave with one final thing is I think, hearkening back a little bit to when you asked Ryan, what's the agenda behind this, I'll be specific. I'll be careful about what I say regarding this, but there is a depopulation movement going on, especially on the globalist stage. And I think anything that leads to the sterilization or the limiting of kids and, the nuclear family and them being productive and multiplying and being fruitful, anything that subverts that and supports a depopulation effort is something that we need to pay attention to. And is this the most effective way for depopulation to take place? Not necessarily, but it could be a part of it.
Yeah.
And I would caution everyone to, think about that possibility that there are people who want our population to shrink. They think we're overpopulated. We think, killing the earth, Greta Thunberg, these type of things, Klaus Schwab, these type of people who think Earth's getting too big, people are a problem, and we need to depopulate. And hey, if you're sterilizing people and castrating people and they can no longer have kids, that definitely fits into that agenda. And it's something that's being forced particularly on naive young adults. So just a footnote on that's something to consider, very deep implication. And some might say that sounds, conspiracy, but it's not too far off base, things we've heard directly from the horse's mouth. So that's another consideration. So that's my final dark note.
Yeah, well, your final dark note was only about 4 words away from us getting either a YouTube strike or a Facebook COVID warning or something. I mean, all we got to talk about now is what the 4 more words: died suddenly, Davos vaccine, and all of a sudden we're all like, this video is gone from the internet. But no, I've actually, I will admit to you, that is something that all of you should consider. And just, I'm not even going to fill in the blanks. Andrew just opened the questions. Just ask the questions. And that's the thing. Yeah. Conspiracy theories, you know what? What is so wrong with questioning anything? Never let someone tell you that something is so crazy you shouldn't even think about it or entertain questions. Entertain a thought. Entertain a question. You might find out very quickly it's nuts and it never happened. Or you might find out very quickly something is fishy and all these things don't make sense, or all these things do make sense. And that's absolutely one of it. I mean, you watch any videos about the World Economic Forum, like or about. You watch any videos from the World Economic Forum, the meetings that just publicly happened in Davos, Switzerland, Klaus Schwab, you mentioned it. You will immediately see a lot of the same sustainable development things that come about in the UN, that come about like in their literature, the way that they talk about it. And I mean, it goes back to this. Well, there's this book. Do I have a copy of it? I do. There's a book that you should go and read. I don't have an extra copy to hand everybody, but you should go and read The Population Bomb. This is a very little interesting piece of literature. Population Control or Race to Oblivion. This is a very, I don't know if I call it important, but this is something you should read. This is of the era of Phyllis Schlafly. She talked a lot about this. The Republican Party, the Democrat Party dealt a lot with this. This is Dr. Paul Ehrlich in 1968. Is it conspiratorial for me to say that someone said these things? No, because it's right here. Ask questions. Don't be afraid to look at some stuff. Run it down, because you'll find out either very quickly that you're wrong or stuff keeps making sense and you should keep going down the road. So let me encourage you. Conspiracy theories, theory being the key thing, that's a very healthy thing in my mind. You should always question and verify. Don't trust. Distrust and verify. Distrust and verify is a good way in this day and age to go about it. So take a look. Look up The Population Bomb, kind of talk about some of that stuff. Maybe that's a good one for later on. We should just run down the whole bit. We can go through the CIA and JFK and Roswell, and we'll hit all the highlights, the goodies. And Yeah, talk about our opinions on that. That could be another good unauthorized caucus. Except that one could be an undisclosed caucus because that would just be a little bit more shady as far as where we are. So anyway, all right. We're going to leave it off there. We've gone on a little bit longer than normal today, but this is a biggie. This is one that needs to be talked about. I've tried to give everyone time to get in here and grab these links. And of course, as always, please go to phyllisschlafly.com, sign up there for our emails. You will get all of these things in email. We send a few every week, at least one a day, but the ones that come out every day are really short. We are trying to give you the most punch we can in the smallest package to get you armed with information and knowledge to go and start having these conversations. So I hope this continues to be helpful for you. We've got some good topics coming up in the future. I'm going to go tell Andrew about those right now as soon as we get offline, because I don't know if he's looking at the comments, but I am, and an interesting one just came through. So thank you for joining us. We look forward to seeing you next Thursday, same time, same place, same screens, thankfully again, and no more monologuing. You'll get both of us. So we'll see you next Thursday for another Unauthorized Caucus. Thanks, everybody. Have a good weekend.